The broom stopped moving the second Elias stepped onto the porch. The sound had been steady before that. Slow. Dry. Bristles scraping old wood before sunrise. Now the silence felt heavier than the noise ever did. Elias stood near the doorway with one hand still resting on the frame. His coat carried dust from the road. His eyes stayed fixed on the young woman standing at the far end of the porch. She held the broom loosely beside her leg. Bare feet against cold boards. Thin dress moving softly in the wind. Elias stared at her feet first. Then her face. Then back to her feet. "Who told you to clean here?" The woman did not answer right away. Her eyes moved across the porch like she was checking for dirt he could not see. "No one." "Then why are you here?" "It was dirty." Her voice stayed calm. Too calm. Elias stepped closer. "You got no shoes?" They were louder. He frowned hard at that. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means shoes make noise." "You always answer questions like that?" "When people ask strange ones." Elias looked toward the yard. The ranch hands near the stable pretended not to watch. One of them disappeared behind the barn the second Elias glanced his way. The woman started sweeping again. Slow. Careful. Like she already belonged there. Elias watched her for another moment before speaking again. "What's your name?" "Mara." "You knew?" "Yes." "Who hired you?" "The cook." "The cook hires kitchen girls. Not porch sweepers." Mara shrugged once. Porch was closer. Elias stepped onto the porch fully now. Old boards creaked under his boots. Mara finally looked directly at him. Her eyes were pale gray. Not soft. Not hard either. Just empty in a way that bothered him immediately. "You from around here?" he asked. "No." "Then where from?" "A place people leave." "That don't answer much." "It answers enough." Elias felt irritation crawl into his chest. He had been back at the ranch less than an hour and already this woman was standing in his mother's house talking like a ghost. He looked toward the front windows. Still covered with dark curtains. Still shut tight since the funeral. "You know whose porch this is?" "Yes." "Then maybe show some respect." Mara lowered the broom slowly. "I am." Elias laughed once under his breath. "You got a strange way of showing it." "So did your mother." The air changed after that. Elias stopped moving completely. "What did you say?" Mara looked at the broom. "Nothing." "No." "Say it again." She stayed quiet. Elias walked closer until only a few feet separated them. "You knew my mother?" "No." "Then don't talk about her." Mara's expression never changed. People talk about dead women differently once the house gets quiet. Elias stared at her so long the silence became painful. The ranch had been quiet for months now. Too quiet. Ever since the funeral. No music from the kitchen. No footsteps upstairs. No arguments with servants. No late-night coughing behind closed doors. Just old wood settling. And now this woman. Standing barefoot where nobody should have been comfortable standing. Elias took the broom from her hands suddenly. "Go inside." "Why?" "Because I said so." "You own the ranch." "Not the heir." "You always difficult?" "You always angry?" He pointed toward the front door. "Inside." Mara looked at him another second before walking past him without hurry. Elias watched her closely as she crossed the doorway. She moved through the house slowly, fingertips brushing the wall once like she remembered it. That bothered him more than anything else. Inside, the ranch smelled old. Coffee gone cold in the kitchen. Dust trapped inside curtains. Burned wood from the fireplace. Elias shut the front door behind them. Mara stood near the staircase now, looking upward. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Listening." "To what?" "The house." Elias rubbed his jaw. "There's nothing to hear." Mara looked at him quietly. "That's not true." Floorboards creaked upstairs. Both of them heard it. Elias looked toward the ceiling instantly. Mara did not move. The sound stopped after one step. Then silence again. Elias walked toward the stairs. "Probably wind." "There's no wind." "You got an answer for everything?" "No. Just the things people avoid." He climbed halfway up the staircase before noticing Mara was following him. "I didn't tell you to come." "You didn't tell me not to." The upstairs hallway looked frozen in time. Closed doors. White sheets covering furniture. Dust resting everywhere untouched. Morning light slipped weakly through thin curtains. Elias stopped near the final door at the end of the hallway. His mother's room. Locked since the funeral. He noticed Mara staring at it already. "You got business there?" he asked. Mara shook her head once. Then said softly, "She wants in." Elias felt cold move slowly through his chest. He stared at the locked door. Then at Mara. "How would you know that?" Mara looked directly at him. "Because she's still here." Elias kept staring at Mara long after her last words settled into the hallway. The old ranch house stood silent around them. Dust floated through thin morning light leaking past the curtains. The locked bedroom door sat between them like something alive. "She's dead," Elias said quietly. Mara nodded once. "I know." "Then don't say things like that." She still stayed. Elias stepped closer to the door. The brass handle looked dull from months untouched. His mother's room had not been opened since the funeral. Not by servants. Not by him. Nobody crossed that doorway anymore. Mara looked at the lock. "You got a key?" she asked. Elias frowned. "Why?" "She wants the room open." "She's buried." "That isn't the same thing." Elias pulled the small iron key from his coat pocket slowly. He hated that his hand shook while doing it. Mara noticed but said nothing. "You really believe houses remember people?" he asked. Mara answered softly. "People leave pieces behind." Elias pushed the key into the lock. Metal scraped. The sound echoed down the hallway. For 1 second he almost stopped. Then the lock turned. The door opened inward with a long dry creak. Cold air slipped from inside the room immediately. Mara entered first. Elias hated that. He followed her inside carefully. Dust covered nearly everything. White sheets draped over chairs and tables like pale bodies waiting in silence. The curtains stayed mostly shut, leaving the room dim except for thin lines of morning light cutting through the dark. Mara walked slowly past the bed. Her fingertips brushed the dresser. Then the mirror. Then the edge of a silver hairbrush resting untouched beside old perfume bottles. "Don't touch that," Elias snapped. Mara looked toward him calmly. "Why?" It was hers. "She's dead." Elias froze again. The words hit harder this time. "You got a cruel mouth," he muttered. "No," Mara replied. "Just honest." Elias looked away from her. His chest felt tight suddenly. He had spent months protecting this room from dust, from servants, from memory itself. Now this strange barefoot woman moved through it like she belonged there. Mara stopped near the window. "You kept everything exactly the same," she said. "That's none of your business." "It smells like grief." Elias clenched his jaw. "You planning on insulting me all morning?" Mara looked around slowly. "I think the house already did that." Silence filled the room again. Outside, distant ranch noises drifted faintly through the walls. Horses. Tools. Men shouting near the stable. Life continuing somewhere else. But not inside this room. Inside felt trapped. Mara crouched beside the vanity table suddenly. Her eyes narrowed at something near the bottom drawer. "What are you doing now?" Elias asked. She pulled the drawer open carefully. Old scarves and folded gloves sat inside untouched. Mara pressed her fingers along the wooden lining beneath them. Then stopped. "There," she whispered. Elias stepped closer. "There what?" Instead of answering, Mara hooked her fingernail beneath the thin wood panel hidden inside the drawer. It lifted slightly. Elias stared. "You knew that was there?" "No." "Then how'd you find it?" She looked up at him. "Your mother hid things badly." Mara pulled the false lining loose. Beneath it rested an old silver sheriff badge wrapped in faded cloth. Neither of them moved. Elias stared at the badge like it might bite him. Mara picked it up carefully. Dust fell from the cloth onto her bare feet. "What is that?" Elias asked quietly. Mara turned the badge in her hand. Tarnished silver caught weak morning light. "Eli," she said. Elias frowned hard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "The kind old women keep until they die." Elias grabbed the badge from her hand suddenly. His breathing sharpened. The engraving looked familiar. Sheriff Abel Vane. Elias felt his stomach tighten instantly. "That name," he muttered. Mara watched him carefully. "You know it." "My father hated him." "There was a reason." Elias looked up fast. "What reason?" Mara stayed quiet. "Talk." "He helped bury people." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "You knew this sheriff?" "No." "Then stop talking like you did." Mara crossed her arms slowly. "Your father disappeared after fighting men like him." "My father abandoned this ranch." "That's what they told you." Elias stepped closer. "Who's they?" "The people still eating at your table." The room suddenly felt smaller. Elias looked at the badge again. Old memories pressed against him hard now. His mother refusing to discuss his father. Locked drawers. Whispered arguments downstairs late at night. Men visiting the ranch after midnight. Things he stopped questioning years ago. "You're lying," he whispered. Mara shook her head once. "No. Your family did." Elias turned away from her sharply and walked toward the window. He shoved the curtain aside hard enough to release a cloud of dust into the air. The ranch stretched outside under pale morning light. Quiet. Normal. But it no longer felt normal. Behind him, Mara stepped closer to the door. "You stealing from me?" Elias asked suddenly without turning around. "No." "Then why take the badge?" Mara slid the silver star carefully into her apron pocket. "Because it never belonged here." Elias looked back at her slowly. "Where does it belong?" Mara opened the bedroom door halfway. "With the truth." Then she walked into the hallway, leaving Elias alone inside his mother's room while dust drifted silently through the cold morning light. The dining room went quiet the second Mara stepped inside behind Elias. Conversations stopped halfway through sentences. Forks lowered slowly onto plates. Even the piano near the far wall fell silent. Warm lamplight covered the room in soft gold, but the air still felt cold. Elias noticed every face turned toward her. Toward the barefoot maid standing behind him in a faded dress while the valley's wealthiest ranch families sat around polished tables pretending not to stare. One man finally laughed under his breath. Another whispered something behind a whiskey glass. Mara remained calm through all of it. Elias pulled out a chair beside his own seat. "Sit." Nobody moved. Mara looked at the chair. Then at Elias. "She eats in the kitchen," one older woman said sharply. Elias answered without looking at her. Tonight she eats here. The woman frowned. At this table? At mine. Mara sat slowly beside him. Her bare feet disappeared beneath the tablecloth, but Elias still felt everyone looking for them. The cook entered carrying another tray but nearly stopped walking after seeing Mara seated beside Elias. Sir, the cook whispered nervously, there may not be enough settings. There's enough. The room stayed tense. At the far end of the table sat Harlan Voss. Old money. Old land. Old power. His gray suit looked expensive even in low light. Heavy rings covered his fingers. His face carried the hard stillness of a man used to owning every room he entered. Now he stared only at Mara. Long enough for Elias to notice. Harlan finally spoke. Who's the girl? Elias poured himself whiskey before answering. Her name's Mara. Harlan kept staring. I asked who she was. Mara lifted her eyes toward him calmly. He answered you. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Harlan leaned back slightly. You speak bold for hired help. Mara reached for her water glass. You ask rude questions for a guest. The silence afterward felt dangerous. Elias almost interrupted. But he didn't. For some reason, he wanted to hear where this would go. Harlan studied Mara's face harder now. Something unsettled moved behind his eyes. Girl, he said quietly, who's your mother? Mara took a slow drink before answering. She's buried. Harlan's fingers tightened around his fork. And your father? Mara looked directly at him. Should be. Nobody spoke after that. Not even the piano player near the wall breathed too loudly. Elias glanced between them carefully now. Harlan looked pale suddenly. Not frightened exactly. Recognizing. That bothered Elias more than anger would have. One of the ranch wives cleared her throat nervously. Well, she muttered, forcing a smile, this is cheerful. Nobody laughed. Dinner continued awkwardly after that. Plates moved around untouched. Low conversations started and died quickly. Every few minutes Elias caught someone staring toward Mara again. She ate quietly. Comfortably. Like she belonged there more than half the room. Harlan barely touched his food. His eyes kept drifting toward Mara whenever she looked away. Finally Elias leaned closer to her. You know him? No. Then why's he looking at you like that? Mara cut another piece of meat slowly. Because his hands shook. So? Men shake when memory comes back. Elias frowned. What memory? Mara looked toward Harlan again. Not mine. Across the table Harlan suddenly set his fork down hard enough to make the silverware rattle. I knew your mother, he said quietly. Mara did not react. Harlan swallowed once. Worked near my property years ago. She cleaned houses, Mara replied. Yes. She died poor. Harlan's jaw tightened. A lot of people did. Mara tilted her head slightly. Some were helped. The room became silent again. Elias saw sweat near Harlan's temple now. The old man reached for whiskey immediately. One rancher near the middle of the table finally muttered, "This ain't proper conversation." Elias answered before Mara could. Then leave. Nobody moved. Nobody wanted to miss this now. Harlan stared at Elias carefully. You seem protective of her. Elias took a slow drink. Maybe I am. She's a servant. She's sitting at your family table. Elias leaned back calmly. Still my table. Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly. Power moved quietly between the two men now. Everybody else in the room felt it. Mara remained completely still through all of it. That calmness unnerved Elias more each hour. Nothing surprised her. Nothing embarrassed her. Like she walked into this dinner already knowing exactly what every person would say. Eventually dessert arrived untouched. The room had lost its appetite long ago. Harlan stood first. Others quickly followed. Chairs scraped against wooden floors while nervous goodnights passed through forced smiles. Harlan stopped beside Elias before leaving. Then looked directly at Mara again. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. Mara answered without hesitation. "That's the problem." Harlan stared another second before walking away. The front door closed heavily behind him. Only then did the room finally breathe again. Elias remained seated beside Mara while servants cleared plates in silence. "You did that on purpose," he muttered. Mara looked toward the doorway Harlan disappeared through. "Did what?" "You knew something about him." "I know fear when I see it. He's not scared of much." "He was tonight." Elias rubbed his jaw slowly. "You enjoy making enemies?" Mara stood from the table carefully. "No." "Then what do you enjoy?" She looked toward him for a long moment before answering. "Watching powerful men remember." Then she walked toward the porch doors. Elias followed her outside into the cool night air. Wind moved softly across the ranch. Lantern lights spilled from the windows behind them while distant horses shifted near the stable. Mara rested both hands against the porch railing. Elias stood beside her. "You gonna tell me what this really is?" he asked quietly. She kept staring into the dark yard. "You already know." "No. I don't." "Yes," Mara whispered. "Your house just taught you not to say it aloud." The rumors spread through town before sunrise. By noon, every ranch hand, bartender, widow, and shopkeeper had something to say about Elias and the Barefoot Maid. Some said she bewitched him. Others claimed she carried dirt from old graves into his house. Nobody understood why Elias suddenly kept her close. Nobody understood why he stopped attending meetings with men like Harlan Voss. And nobody understood why the ranch itself suddenly felt different. Elias heard the whispers the second he rode into town. Two men near the feed store stopped talking when he passed. A woman pulling laundry from a basket crossed herself quietly after seeing Mara beside him in the wagon. Mara noticed too. "You look popular," she said calmly. Elias kept his eyes forward. "Town talks when it gets bored." "No. Town talks when it gets scared." Elias pulled the wagon reins tighter. "You enjoy this?" "No. Could have fooled me." Mara glanced toward the church at the far end of the street. "Fear makes people honest." The wagon stopped outside the general store. Elias climbed down first. Mara stepped down after him barefoot against the dusty road. Several people nearby stared openly now. One older rancher muttered under his breath, "Lord help that house." Elias heard it. "So help it yourself," he snapped. The old man quickly looked away. Inside the store, silence followed them between shelves and hanging lanterns. Even the shop owner looked nervous while wrapping supplies. Finally the man leaned closer to Elias. "You should be careful," he whispered. Elias frowned. "Of what?" "Who you bring into your home." Mara answered before Elias could. "Men say that when women know too much." The shop owner swallowed hard and stopped speaking. Outside again, Elias loaded supplies into the wagon while Mara stood quietly beside him. A group of boys watched her from across the road. One whispered, "That's her." Another asked, "The ghost woman?" Mara looked directly at them. The boys ran instantly. Elias sighed heavily. "You're becoming a problem." "I already was." He looked at her sharply. "You say strange things like you planned all this." Mara climbed back into the wagon slowly. "No one plans rot. They just finally smell it." By evening the ranch felt tense. Workers avoided the main house. Servants whispered behind doors. Elias caught two stable hands arguing quietly about Mara near the barn. She ain't normal, one muttered. She knows things, the other replied. Elias stepped into the stable. You got work to do or gossip to finish? Both men went silent immediately. The younger one finally said carefully, People talk, sir. They always do. Not like this. Elias stared him down. Then stopped listening. That night rain threatened but never came. Clouds covered the moon while warm wind pushed dust across the porch. Elias sat alone in his office with whiskey untouched beside him. Ranch ledgers sat open across the desk, though he had not read a single page. Mara entered quietly without knocking. You keep doing that, Elias muttered. You keep leaving doors unlocked. She noticed the untouched whiskey glass. You thinking or hiding? Elias leaned back heavily. Both. Mara stepped closer to the desk. Harlan sent a man today. Elias looked up immediately. What man? He waited near the gate. What did he want? To warn me. Elias stood instantly. Warn you about what? Mara's face stayed calm. You. Elias laughed once without humor. That old bastard thinks I scare you? No. Then what? He thinks you'll get buried if I stay. Silence settled hard between them. Elias walked toward the window slowly. Outside, lanterns near the stable flickered through darkness. You should leave, he said quietly. Mara stared at him. You want me gone? No. Then don't say things you don't mean. Elias rubbed his face tiredly. You don't understand these people. I understand power. You understand trouble. Same thing. He turned toward her sharply. You think this is a game? No. I think your family survived by feeding dangerous men until they grew hungry. Elias stepped closer now. And what exactly are you? Mara looked directly into his eyes. The hunger. The words stayed in the room after she said them. Elias hated that part of him believed her. He studied her face quietly now. Dust still clung to the hem of her dress. Her bare feet looked pale against the wooden floorboards. She seemed small standing there. Thin. Tired. But never weak. Never afraid. Elias finally asked, Why'd you really come here? Mara answered softly. To finish something. What? She looked toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. Your mother started it before she died. Elias felt anger rise immediately. Stop talking like you knew her. I knew enough. You knew nothing. Mara stepped closer until only inches separated them. She kept letters. Elias froze. What letters? The kind people hide when they regret surviving. His chest tightened hard. How do you know about letters? Because dying women talk when they get lonely. Elias stared at her. You met my mother. Mara stayed silent too long. That silence answered enough. Elias whispered, Who are you? Mara looked almost sad for the first time since arriving at the ranch. Then she said quietly, Someone your house remembers. A loud knock suddenly hit the front door downstairs. Both of them looked toward the hallway instantly. Another knock came. Harder this time. Elias moved first. Mara followed behind him down the staircase. When Elias opened the front door, two men stood outside beneath the porch lantern. Harlan Voss's men. One held his hat respectfully. The other kept a hand near his coat. The older one spoke carefully. Mr. Voss says the girl should leave town. Elias answered immediately. Tell him no. The man shifted uncomfortably. He insists. Mara stepped forward beside Elias. He scared? Neither man answered. Elias looked at them coldly. You done? The second man finally muttered, Things get ugly around women like her. Elias stared at him another second. then said calmly, "Then she stays here." The men looked confused. Elias turned slightly toward Mara. "You don't love me," she said quietly. "No." "Then why protect me?" Elias looked toward the dark ranch beyond the porch. Then back at her. "Because this house stopped feeling dead when you walked into it." The tapping returned after midnight. Slow. Uneven. 3 knocks beneath the floorboards. Then silence. Elias opened his eyes immediately. Beside him, Mara already sat upright in bed staring toward the darkness near the fireplace. The oil lamp beside them burned low, barely holding back the shadows pressed against the bedroom walls. The tapping came again. Elias pushed himself upright. "You hear that?" "Yes." "You know where it's coming from?" "Yes." "Then why didn't you say something before?" Mara looked toward the floor. "You weren't ready." Elias rubbed both hands across his face. Exhaustion sat deep inside him now. Since marrying Mara, sleep barely lasted more than an hour at a time. The ranch itself felt restless after dark. Every hallway creaked. Every room carried whispers of unfinished things. Another knock echoed beneath the bed. Elias swung his legs onto the floor hard enough to shake the frame. "Enough." Mara watched him quietly. He grabbed the oil lamp and knelt beside the bed. Warm light spread across old wooden boards covered in dust and scratches from decades of use. The sound stopped again. Elias pressed his hand against the floor. Nothing. Then one final knock directly beneath his palm. He jerked backward immediately. "What the hell is under there?" Mara climbed down slowly beside him, barefoot against the cold floorboards. "Memory." Elias shot her an angry look. "Stop saying things like that. They stay true whether you like them or not." He grabbed a metal fireplace tool and jammed it into a narrow seam between the boards. Wood cracked sharply. Dust burst upward into the warm lamplight. Mara stayed perfectly calm. Elias forced the board upward. A hollow space appeared beneath the floor. Inside sat several bundles wrapped in faded cloth and tied tightly with old string. Elias stared at them. Mara whispered softly, "There." For a moment neither moved. Then Elias reached down and pulled one bundle free. Old letters spilled across the floorboards. Yellowed paper. Faded ink. Carefully folded secrets. "What is this?" Elias muttered. Mara crouched beside him. "The truth." He unfolded the first letter slowly. His eyes moved across the page. The longer he read, the tighter his jaw became. Land agreements. Sheriff signatures. Names of missing ranch workers. Payments. Threats. His mother's handwriting appeared near the bottom. Elias stopped breathing for a second. "No." Mara said nothing. He grabbed another letter. Then another. Each one worse. Each one dragging old family lies into the light. "My mother knew," he whispered. "Yes." "She signed these." "Yes." "She helped them." Mara lowered her eyes slightly. "She survived them." Elias stood suddenly, papers falling around his boots. "She told me my father abandoned us." Mara looked up calmly. "That was easier." "For who?" "For everyone still alive." Elias paced across the room now, furious energy shaking through him. "My father wasn't weak." "No." "He wouldn't run." "No." "Then where is he?" Mara stayed silent. Elias slammed his fist against the dresser hard enough to rattle the mirror. "Talk." "He found things he wasn't supposed to find." "What things?" "Bodies." The room became still. Elias stared at her. Mara continued quietly. "Men disappeared near this ranch for years." "That's impossible." "Nothing buried stays buried forever." Elias shook his head violently. No. Harland wouldn't. He would. My mother wouldn't. She did. The words hit harder than anger. Elias sank slowly onto the edge of the bed. Letters surrounded his boots like pieces of a broken life. The oil lamp flickered weakly beside them. Mara picked up one final folded paper from beneath the others. This one matters most. Elias looked up at her carefully. Why? Because your mother wrote it before she died. She handed it to him. Elias unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The handwriting looked rushed. Uneven. Afraid. If anything happens to me, the well behind the orchard knows everything. Elias read the sentence twice. Then again. Finally he whispered, What well? Mara watched him closely. The old one past the trees. That place has been sealed for years. Not well enough. Elias looked toward her sharply. You knew about this already. Yes. How? My mother told me before she died. Silence. Then Elias finally asked the question sitting between them since the day she arrived. Who was your mother? Mara's face tightened for the first time. She worked here. Elias frowned. Doing what? Cleaning. That's all? Mara looked directly into his eyes. She was pregnant. The room suddenly felt too small. Elias stood slowly again. Pregnant with who? Mara answered softly. Me. Elias stared at her like he no longer recognized the woman standing in front of him. My father? I don't know. Harland? I don't know. You're lying. No. I truly don't know. Elias stepped closer now, anger mixing with confusion and grief. Then why come here? Mara's voice stayed steady. Because my mother died terrified of this ranch. That's not my fault. I know. Then what do you want from me? Mara looked around the dark bedroom slowly. I wanted someone inside this house to finally stop pretending. The wind outside pushed softly against the windows. Floorboards creaked beneath them. The ranch felt awake now. Listening. Elias looked down at the scattered letters again. Every memory from childhood suddenly felt poisoned. Every story his mother told him now sounded rehearsed. He whispered, Everything I knew was fake. Mara shook her head gently. No. Elias laughed bitterly. You just proved it was. No, she said softly. I proved they were scared. The oil lamp flickered again. Then almost died. Elias looked toward the dark hallway outside the bedroom door. The well, he muttered. Mara nodded once. That's where this ends? She stared at him for a long moment before answering. No. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. That's where it starts. The orchard looked dead at night. Twisted trees stretched across dry ground behind the ranch house while weak lantern light moved between them. Elias walked ahead carrying the lantern low beside his leg. Mara followed closely behind him barefoot through the dirt, her dress brushing softly against dead weeds and broken branches. Neither spoke for most of the walk. Wind pushed through the trees with a low hollow sound. Finally Elias stopped. The old well sat ahead of them beneath the darkest part of the orchard. Half covered with warped wooden boards. Stone edges cracked from age. Dead vines hanging down the sides. That thing? Elias muttered. Mara nodded once. My mother hated this place. Elias stepped closer carefully. You really think answers are down there? I think fear is. He crouched beside the stone edge and lifted the lantern higher. Darkness swallowed the inside completely. No bottom visible. No sound either. Just black silence. Elias looked toward Mara. You scared? Yes. He almost smiled. Good. Why? Means you still got sense. Mara walked closer until she stood beside him. You still got yours? Elias stared into the well again. Not sure anymore. The wooden cover groaned loudly when Elias pulled it aside. Dust and dead leaves slid into the darkness below. The smell rising from the well was damp and old. Mara wrapped both arms around herself slightly. You cold? Elias asked. No. Then what? Feels wrong here. Elias lowered the lantern carefully into the opening using an old rope hanging nearby. Light descended slowly through the darkness. Stone walls. Wet moss. Then something metal caught the light near the bottom. There, Mara whispered. Elias narrowed his eyes. I see it. He pulled the lantern back up quickly and tied the rope around his waist. Mara grabbed his arm immediately. Don't. We came for answers. We came alive too. Elias looked at her hand gripping his sleeve. You worried about me? No. He smirked faintly. Liar. Mara let go instantly. Elias climbed carefully over the stone edge and lowered himself down slowly into the well. Old rocks shifted beneath his boots. Dirt crumbled into darkness below him. Above, Mara held the rope tightly with both hands. Hurry, she whispered. You always this nervous? Yes. That's new. You're enjoying this too much. No, Elias answered from below. I'm angry too much. The lantern swung beside him as he descended deeper. Cold air surrounded him now. Then his boots finally touched the bottom. Mud. Shallow water. Rotting wood. Elias lifted the lantern higher. A rusted metal box rested against the stone wall. His breathing slowed. Found something. Mara leaned over the opening above him. What? A box. Open it. Elias crouched and pulled it free from the mud. Rust cracked loudly beneath his fingers. He forced the lid upward. Inside sat old papers wrapped in cloth. Several rings. A stained piece of fabric. And a photograph. Elias stared at the picture first. Then froze completely. Mara. Her voice came down quickly. What? There's a child in this picture. Silence. Then softly, show me. Elias climbed back upward slower this time. By the time he reached the surface his hands were shaking. Mara helped pull him over the edge. Both of them sat beside the well breathing hard. Elias handed her the photograph. The second she saw it, her face changed. Not fear. Not surprise. Something heavier. Recognition. The old black and white photograph showed a young woman standing beside the orchard well holding the hand of a little girl. Barefoot. Same pale eyes. Same face. Mara whispered, That's my mother. Elias looked at the child again carefully. And that's you. Mara nodded once. You knew this picture existed? My mother burned the other copy. Elias frowned hard. Why keep this hidden down there? Mara unfolded one of the papers carefully. Because someone wanted nobody finding it. Elias took another document from the box. Lists of names covered the page. Missing workers. Land transfers. Sheriff payments. One name appeared repeatedly beside the signatures. Harland Voss. Elias felt sick. He paid them. Mara stayed focused on the photograph. Yes. For what? She looked toward the dark opening of the well. To disappear people. The wind moved harder through the orchard now. Branches creaked overhead. Elias stared at the papers in disbelief. My mother knew all this. She tried hiding it. Why not destroy it? Maybe guilt scared her. Elias rubbed dirt across his face tiredly. This whole ranch is rotten. Mara folded the photograph carefully against her chest. Rot spreads. Elias looked at her. Why come back here after what they did? Mara answered quietly, to see if monsters get old. The orchard suddenly fell silent. Completely silent. Even the wind stopped. Mara looked up sharply. You hear that? Elias reached slowly for the revolver at his side. Then came the sound. Horse hooves. Close. Too close. Lantern light appeared faintly between the trees. More than one rider. Mara stood immediately. We need to go. Elias stayed focused on the darkness ahead. Too late. The riders stopped just beyond the orchard shadows. Neither Elias nor Mara could fully see their faces. But one voice carried clearly through the night. Harland Voss. You should have left that well buried. Mara stepped closer beside Elias. You buried enough already. Harland slowly rode forward into the lantern glow. Older now. Tired too. But his eyes still carried the same cold control. He looked down at the photograph in Mara's hands. Then at her face. For the first time since Elias met him, Harland looked afraid. Real fear. You look just like her, Harland whispered. Mara's jaw tightened. That keeps happening. Harland glanced toward the papers beside the well. You don't understand what those men were. Elias snapped, then explain it. Harland ignored him completely. His eyes never left Mara. Your mother should have taken the money and disappeared. Mara stepped forward. She tried. Harland's expression darkened. Some places don't let people leave. Elias pulled his revolver free now. The riders behind Harland shifted uneasily. Mara never moved. Never blinked. Harland finally whispered something that made the entire orchard feel colder. She wasn't supposed to keep the child. The orchard stayed silent after Harland spoke. Nobody moved. Not Elias. Not Mara. Not the riders waiting behind Harland beneath the dark trees. The lantern beside the well flickered weakly in the wind while the old photograph trembled slightly in Mara's hand. Elias kept his revolver pointed forward. What does that mean? He asked coldly. Harland looked tired suddenly. Older than before. Like the orchard itself drained something from him. It means mistakes were made, he muttered. Mara stepped closer. I was the mistake? Harland's jaw tightened. Your mother complicated things. She was a woman. She talked too much. She got pregnant. Silence. One rider behind Harland shifted uncomfortably in the saddle. Elias looked between them carefully now. You knew her. Harland ignored him. Mara's eyes stayed fixed on the old man. Who's my father? Harland finally looked at her fully. Does it matter? Yes. No, Harland whispered. Not after what this place became. Elias stepped forward. You threatening her? Harland shook his head slowly. I'm warning both of you. About what? The truth. Mara laughed once without humor. That's convenient coming from you. Harland looked toward the papers beside the well. Those names destroy families. Elias snapped immediately, families built on dead men deserve it. The riders behind Harland exchanged nervous looks. Harland stared at Elias carefully. Your father used to speak like that. Elias froze. You knew where he went. Harland stayed quiet. You buried him too? No. Then where is he? Harland's voice lowered. Gone. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get. Mara suddenly looked toward the ranch house far beyond the orchard. Something glowed faintly through the darkness. Orange light. Moving. Her face changed instantly. Elias. He turned sharply. What? The barn. Both of them looked toward the ranch. Flames climbed suddenly into the night sky. Bright. Violent. The barn was burning. Elias cursed and ran immediately. Mara followed beside him through the orchard while smoke rose above the ranch buildings in thick black waves. Behind them, Harlan shouted something, but neither stopped to listen. By the time they reached the yard, ranch hands were already screaming for water buckets. Horses kicked wildly inside nearby stalls. Fire exploded through the dry wooden barn walls with terrifying speed. Elias grabbed a bucket from one of the workers. What happened? Nobody knows. Mara looked around quickly. Where are the records? Elias froze. The ledgers. The documents. Still inside the barn office. Damn it. He threw the bucket aside and started toward the flames. Mara grabbed his arm hard. No. They'll burn. So will you. Elias pulled free. Those papers are proof. And dead men can't use proof. He ignored her and charged into the smoke. The heat hit instantly. Wood cracked overhead while terrified horses screamed nearby. Elias wrapped part of his coat across his mouth and forced himself deeper inside the barn office through falling ash and sparks. The room already burned around the edges. Flames crawled across walls and shelves. Elias grabbed the ledger books from the desk fast, stuffing papers beneath his arm while smoke thickened around him.